Standing up in McKinney, this is According to Callis, coming to you on April the 8th, 2024, the year of our Lord. And if you're listening to this, we obviously have survived the great eclipse. Now, I'm not one to blow off signs in the skies, but to equate an eclipse with the end of the year world, that might be a bit of a stretch. However, if you're listening to me, we know that didn't happen. So here we go. On with the program. So typically it would be a Monday, McKinney Monday, right? A local news day, if you will. We're going to cover some of that. We're also going to tip over and talk a little bit about the party and elections. We just can't get away from that, can we? And this is going to be a Civil War week. We're getting the movie coming out that I've been waiting for months now. So each week or each day this week, we're going to spend, about 10 minutes talking about the war and the implications put forth by the movie just from the trailers. Before we get to that, before we step off into the program itself, let me remind you the best way you can help me continue to grow the show, make a difference, and let this alternative view be heard is to like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. Now, I'm going to be honest. The last couple of weeks were really rough. We got shadow banned or something. Really drove down our numbers. However, the nice interview I was able to do with Mr. Scott down in Allen bounced us back. Put it back where we would expect to be. So I'm going to ask you, do me a solid. Like, share, and subscribe to this program. Follow me at your podcatcher of choice. You don't even necessarily need to download the show, but the subscription matters. And we're closing in on 100 subscribers, so that's helpful. We get, let's say, 8 to 10 times that amount listening on the average day, but we can do better. We need to do better. You cannot make an impact if you don't have numbers. That being said, help me out here. Do me a solid. And for a reminder, I am on the social medias. I have a page and a group on Facebook. I am a pro over at Gab, and I still drop in on MeWe. And for now, most of my programs are still available via YouTube. Audio only, folks. Audio only. Once upon a time, I was told I had a face for radio, and after I got done laughing, I realized it was not much of a compliment. All right, so here we go on with the program. All right, in the news over the weekend, it was put out by my outgoing mayor. Well, I guess outgoing. Let's say not quite retired mayor, that a big score was made. That is, we've got the federal government that's going to pony up a significant amount of money to update Highway 5, including an overpass, underpass situation. Now, keep in mind, we talked about this, early last year. There were 3 models, 3 different designs they were looking at. One was going to create a tunnel. One was going to create like a lowered park situation. And the other one was like, let's just say not exciting at all. I was partial to the non-tunnel, but that being said, I don't remember what one they settled down on or they thought was best. And honestly, it doesn't matter because they were preliminary designs. Preliminary designs never make it to the final decision. So for what it's worth, kudos to the city of McKinney and the mayor. You pulled it off. You got the feds to pony up some major money for this. Now, I want to remind all my dear listeners that federal money is not free money. No money that you get from government is free. Somebody's paying for it. In fact, you and I are paying for it in some way, somehow. However, by getting it via the feds or the state, it does spread load the amount over a larger number of people. So it seems free, but it's not free. Now, do I think this is a worthwhile investment is really what the key is, because all my criticisms typically have to do with whether or not it's a good investment. So I'm going to be upfront here. Highway 5 needs to be updated, needs to be upgraded. That's a given. But whether or not this is the best option or this is going to give us the best outcome, I don't know. But I do know it will be significantly better than what we have now. And I'm encouraged that the efforts being put in to kind of connect the downtown square with the new municipal area. Now, I also am not naive. I know there will be some people, key people, benefiting from this. But let me tell you, that's a given. That's understood. Every time there's a project that gets done in a city or a county or even a state, somebody's benefiting. But the final analysis is likely to show the city of McKinney is going to benefit and benefit significantly. And for me, that's the most important thing. I don't mind if some people in the know or the city fathers or the chosen few or however you want to phrase it get a little something out of all these projects. I really don't mind that as long as the city, the county, the state, whoever the entity is, sees a net positive. And I mean a significant net positive to overlook and overcome the graft that is part of the project. It's built in. It's self-existing. It's never going to go away. I don't like it, but I accept it. It's the way the world works and the way things get done. Just because there's graft doesn't mean you can't get a good project. Just because somebody got their a little something extra doesn't mean that it's a terrible idea. Now, that's a challenge if you're a liberty advocate, if you're a Republican or a Libertarian, and you don't think the government should be involved in any of this stuff. Well, yes, I agree. That would be nice. In a perfect world, great. But we don't live in a perfect world. We live in Texas, which ideally is in the top 5 best states to live in the entire country. And some would say the number 1, and I certainly have on more than one occasion referred to it as the promised land. And I believe that's the case, but we have to be wise and we have to consider whether or not investing now is going to have a bigger long-term payoff than not investing. And I think in this instance, the case is clear that the city is going to benefit and benefit significantly. And yeah, some other people are going to be disproportionately benefited from this. But again, that's a given. We knew that going in. And whatever the final design is, I have some faith that it's going to be a little bit better than the tunnel version. I like the submerged or the lowered park kind of look. I think that's kind of neat. And certainly if it's lower and done well, there'd be shade. That to me is really neat. And if we can get some little businesses that are willing to locate down in there, even the better. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Call me cautiously optimistic. Call me mildly pleased. But again, this is a feather in the cap, right? These are some of those things that have been worked on for the last 6, 8, 10, 20 years. Who knows how long, but it's finally coming to fruition. So look, if you want to give credit where credit's due, it goes to the council and the mayor. You don't have to like any of them, but you have to acknowledge when they do something good, or at least appears to be good. Again, we don't know. It's not done yet. But again, I believe it's going to be better than what we have now. Even if it's not perfect, it will be significantly better than what we have now. Credit goes where credit is due. I have no problem holding people accountable when bad things happen, but we have to be willing to also give them credit when good things happen. And I'm hoping and believing this is a good thing. Speaking of good things and bad things, the Calhoun County Republican Party seems just destined to its own self-immolation. Now, there are legal proceedings being brought up about somebody that, well, let's say we made an error in judgment. I mean, that's the nicest way I would phrase it. Some have said it's a criminal offense. Maybe. I'm not a judge. I'm not a jury. I don't even play an attorney. But I fail to see how if you make an offer and you're open and honest about it and then public about it, why that would be a criminal act. But apparently the law says it is potentially a criminal act. Apparently we're so hell-bent on our purity that we would rather throw good quality people under the bus than figure something out. And the virtue signaling about concern, most of it's BS. Now, that being said, I'm going to leave a carve out here. I do know at least one individual that I do highly respect. Don't always agree, but I highly respect, that is basically holding my own feet to the fire. Basically, you say do you believe these things? You want these things and you want the right things to happen. This is an opportunity for you to prove it. Fair enough. So let me elaborate just a wee bit. I'm a big advocate that unless you have a really awesome elected official, that every elected official should be challenged, whether it's in the primary or the general, preferably both. They should have to run to keep their job. They should have to put effort in and show why they're good enough to keep their job. I do believe that. I believe you should have more than one option. When you force a runoff, that's part of the scenario, right? You're forcing somebody that you're not happy with to face more than one challenger, whether it's in a primary. Well, actually, most of the time that's when it happens in primary. In this specific scenario, and again, I'm not going to argue the law because I don't know what it is. I know what I've been told, and I believe the person that told me, but I also believe there's got to be an intent. There's got to be a desire for some malfeasance. And making something public kind of seems to undermine that whole premise. Now, whether or not it was the person I like or dislike, I'm really hard pressed to see where you want to go the route of criminal charges. Oddly enough, apparently the Secretary of State thinks there's there. So that go to the Office of Attorney General, and after the last 10 years of his life, I'm not sure that he's going to be super keen on political prosecution, but that's where we're at. Now, giving the benefit of the doubt to the person that explained this to me, and again, I have no doubt they know more about this than I do. Is there a potentially criminal behavior that occurred here? Yes. I don't even think that the person that made the potentially fatal error would deny that such a thing happened. In fact, I think it's public knowledge that this happened, as well as an explanation of what was at play here. What's interesting to me is it was reciprocated. Now, whether it was tongue-in-cheek or it was legit is kind of irrelevant, but if you're going to go after one, seems to me you need to go after both. Seems to me that if you're going to hold one person accountable for doing something that maybe potentially was foolish or potentially illegal and criminal on top of it, then you need to hold the other person accountable to the same extent. Now, I understand the motivations. I understand what's at stake here. I do. But I also understand that the people that are crying about this and making stink, the vast majority of them really have an underlying nefarious thing at mind here. Whether it's just the stuck in the purity cycle, right? The purity swirl that we must jettison everybody that doesn't 100% agree with us and do things exactly the way we want, or if it's legitimate, somebody that just hung up on the fact that somebody made a legal error and they need to suffer consequence. And honestly, I'm sympathetic to that. I don't like it, but I am sympathetic to it. So I'm caught in a tough spot here because this individual I spoke to did something successfully that hasn't happened too often outside of my wife, which is to call me on my own stuff and say, look, if you say you believe this, if you say that this is the right thing, then it has to always be the right thing. Fair enough. But I also believe that there is a legal process, and until somebody's convicted, they're innocent until proven guilty, even when it appears the guilt is self-evident. Because there is a portion of it that keys off of intent and malfeasance. And I don't believe either was in play here. But again, if we're going to follow the letter of the law, yeah, it doesn't look good. But if you're going to follow the spirit of the law, if you're going to acknowledge what the intent was, well, then you have to have some grace. And I spend a lot of my time extending grace to people that, quite frankly, a lot of times don't deserve it, in my opinion. I'm tired of giving them grace, but I do it because I believe, and I want to believe, that most of them have their heart genuinely in the right place, both generally and genuinely, I suppose. And they want basically the same things that I do. They just can't see past certain things, or they're just so hung up on the details that they're missing the big picture. Now, this individual that I spoke to, I don't necessarily believe that's the case with him. I believe he's legitimately saying, hey, look, this is what the law says. There should be a consequence if you're going to violate the law. And I know this person well enough to say, without a doubt, everybody comes in the crosshairs. So that being said, I'm not going to weigh in too much deeper on this. I've not used names. I've not made cross accusations per se. I'm just saying that it's disappointing. It's disappointing that this is where we're at. It's disappointing that allegedly or apparently a few or a dozen people have decided to come forward and potentially destroy somebody's life because of this. And I hope they're proud of themselves. I hope they accomplish what they want. But just know, this is something that probably could have been handled without escalating it to this point, in my opinion. In my opinion, if somebody does something that's worthy of a slap on the wrist, then they should get a slap of the wrist. Or a smack upside the head. Metaphorically or legitimately, or literally, excuse me. But the legitimate failure here is multiple layers deep. So we're just going to leave this alone. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I have more than one general thought on this, and we're not going to belabor the point anymore. Because quite frankly, I'm ready for the runoffs to be over. I'm ready for the election cycle to be over. I want to get my wins or losses and chalk them up and move on. And I think a certain amount of this is driven by bitterness, by people that haven't been able to win on their own, so they're going to tear somebody else down along with them. That's what I think. But I don't know that. I don't perceive into people's hearts, and I can know their motivations. I'm not some kind of telepathic or empath, but it just looks icky. The whole thing looks icky. And I'm going to use that word because I can't think of anything more descriptive than what this is. Icky. And to a degree, yeah, the person did screw up. Fine. But people screw up all the time, and we don't look to destroy their lives over it. And again, intent matters. All right, enough. Elections need to get over. The runoffs need to be done. It can't be done soon enough at this point. I'm tired of it. And I love this stuff, and I'm tired of it. Because the reason why I'm tired of it is we're just eating our own. We're destroying ourselves over some ideal that is not obtainable. And look, I got to tell you, for what it's worth, as a liberty activist, as somebody that's, been accused of being a liar, which is a libertarian impersonating an actual Republican, I'm okay with that. You can call me that all day long, but I've always been open and honest about it. Yeah, I'm a liberty advocate. I've joined the Republican Party because I know that, one, the Republican Party is pretty close to where I'm at, and two, if I want to make a difference, if I want to move the needle, this is the party I need to work with. And that requires some people need to get over themselves, and honestly, it required me to get over myself quite a bit. There's negotiations, there's conflicts, there's disagreements, but the final analysis is I can get more done here by sucking up, swallowing a little bit of my pride, and being willing to work with people that generally agree with the end goals that I have, that we want. They're mutually beneficial. Just like the things that are going to be done in the city of McKinney with the Highway 5 upgrades, it's mutually beneficial. I believe this is the case here. And when the primaries are over, hopefully we can put some of this behind us, or most of it. And this is the other thing. Even when people lose, they don't forget. They're supposed to forgive. I don't necessarily require that you forget, but you got to let it go. There's lots of things that have happened to me and other people I know, and it's a challenge, but you got to let it go. You can't let it drive everything that you do. It messes you up and causes you to miss out on other things. Getting hammered down on specific details on every little thing does nobody any good. Indeed, we all lose out oftentimes when that happens. Is that really what you want? I don't. I'm not interested in that. I want to win. I want to make a difference. But I'm not also willing to sacrifice my values. I'm not willing to kick aside the things that I stand for. But I am willing to compromise on things that are lesser relevant. I am willing to accept that I can't have everything that I want. I think a lot of folks that are quote unquote on my team can't accept that. Just my thoughts. All right, I got about 10 minutes left. We're going to now do the final pivot. this is going to be Civil War week. And by Civil War, I mean there's a movie coming out, courtesy of A24. Looks entirely interesting. And it could be anywhere from fantastic to, oh my gosh, this is terrible. And I'm hoping towards the fantastic. And let's be clear, a movie about the Civil War, or a Civil War, or a movie in general, I want them to be fantastic, but I also want them to be thought-provoking. I don't want people to look at this and say, oh, this is so awesome. This is Red Dawn 3.0. This is what we want. This is the ideal for America going forward. No, it's not. I'm hopeful that they'll give a somewhat balanced, I'm not hoping that it's going to be fully fair, but somewhat balanced, maybe a little nuance on the various sides, the various factions, and how we got here, and what is at stake for all the people involved. I mean, think about it. What could possibly encourage Texas and California to align against the federal government? Now, I could think of perhaps 2 or 3 issues. They may even have varying answers for it, but they don't like what the feds want to push upon them. What would cause a Southeastern or a Florida alliance? I mean, I don't want it spelled out 100%, but I certainly would like at least a plausible explanation. I did find their lumping of the loyalist states quite interesting. But again, it's fiction. It's supposed to be plausible and cause you to think. I would assume the motivation behind the movie is to point the idea out that you don't want a civil war. And while it makes a great movie, perhaps, potentially a great movie, and while it makes a interesting fiction topic, actually experiencing it, not a good thing. Actually, watching this play out while you're involved in it, not something that you really want to do. What's interesting to me is, as I've watched the trailer a couple of times now in the last few weeks, one of the characters makes the comment that when they were reporting about this overseas, they always assumed or believed that the reporting of the stuff going on overseas would be cautionary or preventative of it actually happening in these United States. She seemed dismayed about this. So I found that interesting. So I see myself here. You know, I'm an advocate for Texas. I'm an advocate for independence of multiple states. I'm an advocate for the dissolution of the empire that is these United States, only for so far as I don't see a way forward. I don't see a way that we can survive going forward because we've spent ourselves into oblivion. We've done so many foolish things and overextended ourselves so far that I don't see there's any way that we can continue in this current path. The only way that we would succeed long term is to break ourselves up into smaller chunks that are self-governing. That's going to mean that we're going to repudiate debt, probably. It's going to mean that things get jumbled up. It's going to mean that we're going to be potentially open to foreign invasion. But wait, that's already going on right now. The federal government is actually helping the foreign invaders. So one wonders if perhaps they're not pulling the strings to put us into a situation where we have a multi-factional breakup in these United States. I mean, look. Truth is stranger than fiction. Who would have thought that we would have our own nation led by an incompetent individual, and more than one incompetent individual, who are getting their strings pulled by Marxist, socialist, progressive Democrats that seek to undermine and destroy the very nation that they've been living in a parasitical fashion off of for decades? Who would have thought that that would have been the outcome as little as 10 years ago or 20 years ago? Certainly in my childhood, the biggest fear was the Red Dawn scenario, right? We're invaded by factors from outside. Those communists are going to come here to take over, but we don't even have to worry about that right now. I see something more akin to what played out in the book Blue Dawn that I referenced here about a week or so ago, and the idea that we're taken over from inside. The coup is a coup d'etat, but it's not, because there is going to be a lot of bloodshed. There is going to be a lot of consequences. In that book, the military stood aside. So the premise is, in the movie Civil War, the military chooses sides, or at least sections of the military choose sides, and they follow the federal government. They follow the resident in chief, right? They take action, and there's strong, stark consequences. Now, keep in mind, when you go after civilians, when you're going after sections that just want to be left alone, that's not going to end well. You know, I was communicating with an individual last week, and I foolishly gave him the benefit of the doubt. I foolishly believed that that they were interested in a legitimate conversation of what happens if Texas goes independent. The person finally let the cat out of the bag. They're not interested in that. And after saying we're going to crush the insurrection, well, first of all, an insurrection seeks to overthrow the government. We're not seeking to overthrow the government in D.C. We're looking to separate apart from it. We're looking to secede from the Union. I know that's a dirty word. We want to declare our independence. We want to become an independent, self-governing nation. We believe that a lot of other states would be beneficial to do that as well. But that doesn't mean there couldn't be a federal union. Once again, it doesn't mean that we couldn't reset the process. It doesn't mean that we couldn't potentially form something along the lines of what we originally had, which is the federal government served 2 or 3 key purposes, which was to keep foreign invaders out, which they're not interested in doing clearly now. In fact, they're working against that very aim right now, as they're encouraging and enabling a foreign invasion from multiple areas across the globe to come here to these United States. One wonders what this subversion and this inversion is all about. Did they sell us out for money? Did they sell us out because they thought they were going to get key positions of power? And I will tell you, historically, it doesn't work out well for the traitors, those that undermined and sold out their very country. Because even if the good guys are successful, i.e. they drive them out, look at Vichy France, right? The people that ran Vichy France, as soon as France was liberated, they meant their ends. The Quislings up in Sweden, or is it Norway? Doesn't matter. The Nordic countries. Those Quislings, they suffered a similar fate once they were liberated. The fascists in Italy, once Italy regained its nominal freedom, they dealt with those folks. The same thing with Ceausescu and friends, right? They ran with an iron boot on the neck of everyone else, and when they finally got that boot off their neck, those people paid the consequence. Now, it was a good ride? Well, it lasted, right? Hey, tyranny's great when you're the one that's tyrannical, but when you lose that power, when you lose that upper hand, you tend to pay for it with your life. So I'm assuming that these folks in D.C. are gambling that they're going to win, which is why they're bringing in all these foreign invaders. And then when you consider the ideal, or not the ideal, the idealistic view of what secession looks like or what independence looks like, and contrast that with what the likelihood is going to be, when I describe to you that we want to peacefully separate and become our own self-governing entity, a la Czech Republic and Slovakia, a la the Baltic states, those are plausible outcomes that are obtainable if both sides agree that it's sometimes you're better off going alone. A peaceful national divorce, if you will. But if you want to do what is played out many, many times, and you want to foresee what this might look like in the United States, Matt Bracken in the Civil War Cube, or Civil War II Cube, or whatever it was, it's been a bit, hypothesized that you're going to be looking at the Balkans times Rwanda, right? Just as terrible as you could possibly imagine, and everybody's going to be at each other's throats. Keeping in mind what you've seen happen in Minnesota, or Michigan, or Maine. These formerly, let's call them, European pacifistic individuals are being overrun by people that don't fit that definition at all. We've actively encouraged narco-terrorists. We've actively encouraged Muslim invaders. We've actively encouraged communists via China to come in and implant themselves into our nation. To what end, I ask? Well, if you're looking to subjugate and split up and destroy the nation, I can think of no way better than to undermine it from within, from destroying it from within, so that you can justify having external forces come in and quote-unquote assist. Now, these seem fantastic, fictionalized ways of accomplishing this, and you may be right. But if you believe in the idea of predictive programming, I would tell you that the Civil War movie doesn't happen in a vacuum. I'm going to have 4 more episodes where we're going to spend the last 5 or 10 minutes just kind of talking about different things about the movie and how it relates to real life. But the last thing I really, really want to impress upon all of you that might be listening to my voice, while I am an advocate of a peaceful separation, I am adamantly opposed to taking up arms. I'm adamantly opposed of thinking that you can successfully wage a war amongst yourselves and anybody wins. Don't do that. Don't fall for it. Don't think that's a good way forward. It's not. We all lose. And with that, this has been According to Callus, and I will see you on the other side.